From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. As the son of composer Alfred Newman, a legend who oversaw no small amount of Broadway to movie musicals like The King and I and South Pacific, David Newman has certainly left his own underscoring imprint on the big screen with the lush orchestral likes of Hoffa, War of the Roses, and Galaxy Quest. But it's in his passion for concert performances of live music to film picture that Newman has created thrilling, note-perfect renditions of 1961's Best Picture and Best Scoring winner, West Side Story. Arguably called not only the greatest stage musical and film translation of all time in the teaming of director Robert Wise, lyricist Stephen Sondheim, and composer Leonard Bernstein, this Manhattan gang spin on Shakespeare's feuding Venora families and the love affair rent asunder seem to be sacred material that no director would dare remake. But then again, they aren't Steven Spielberg, who shows the kind of artistic rumble can be won with his daring, yet lovingly faithful remake that brings new steps and original underscoring to a beloved tragic tale. And he couldn't have recruited a more knowledgeable arranger than David Newman to team with LA Philharmonic conductor Gustavo Dudamel and music consultant John Williams, who played piano on the original film soundtrack, to put an energetically familiar yet robustly new spring into the gang steps of the Jets and the Sharks, while bringing vibrantly gorgeous warmth to the ballads of Maria and Tony. It's a thrilling update by a musician who knows all of the Shark and Jet steps and fire escape romance, yet isn't afraid to throw in new moves. And now let's welcome a composer and conductor whose arrangements here have helped make West Side Story sing again. From concert stage to screen, David Newman.
Hello.
Hey, David, it's great having you on. Thank you so much.
Great to be on.
So just tell me, what was the very first time you ever saw West Side Story? Did it just immediately hit you at the moment?
No, the first foray into West Side Story, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I listened to the Broadway cast album. I actually listened with my father, which was kind of unusual because it was the last years of his life. He got up pretty late, went to bed pretty late, and was really busy in the 60s. After he left Fox in 59, he thought, he's not going to work anymore. And he did a lot of stuff in the 60s. So it was sometime probably in the middle 60s that I first became aware of it vis-a-vis the Broadway cast album. Then when we were in high school, I went to Palisades High School in the west side of Los Angeles. When we were in 11th grade, so I probably was 15, there was a production of West Side Story, which took the entire spring semester, and I was the rehearsal pianist. So I really learned the show by playing it for months, for choreography, rehearsals, singing, et cetera, et cetera. I played in the orchestra. It was just the most thrilling thing. I don't know how good it was or not, but everyone that was involved in it just loved it. In my 20s, I was involved in a kind of amateur semi-pro company, and I got to actually be the music director for West Side Story, in which we ended up having a union, a professional orchestra. So I got a real taste of what it was like being, it was one of, I think we would do one show a summer. We did it 5 or 6 years, something like that. But I got a really good idea of what it was to be a music director on a show like West Side Story. And then, then I started writing film music, and I didn't really get back to it. Of course, I saw the film, and probably around when I heard the original Broadway soundtrack, my mom took us on we saw this film of all places in Chicago in a big like Cinerama Dome thing. And I just remember there's something about West Side Story that's so different and beautiful and poignant just from the very, very beginning of it. It wasn't like any movie I'd ever seen. So anyway, cut to 2011, and we premiered the movie with live orchestra. You showed some pictures of that at the Hollywood Bowl. And then I've done that show probably with 7 or 8 different orchestras, great orchestras, some of the best orchestras in the world, including the New York Philharmonic and Los Angeles Philharmonic. I've probably done it 40 times, 50 times, something like that. So basically with West Side Story, you've got the Broadway show that Sid Raymond and Irwin Kostal orchestrated. You've got the movie, which is, the Broadway's 1957, I believe. The movie comes out 1961. It also is orchestrated by Sid Raymond and Irwin Kostal. So they're in on the original creation. They're in on the movie. The movie, the Bernsteins and Sondheim, all of them, they really had very little to do with the movie. It was mainly Jerome Robbins. Arthur Lawrence had very little to do with it as well. They famously very much disliked the movie, which is why I think that this even came about. And you see how long it took because of the huge, the hugeness of the reception of the movie and the show, and them being so close together. And then you've got Bernstein did a version of it in 1961 that's called the Symphonic Dances, and it is in what we in classical music circles call it's in the canon. So the canon means there's like 400 or 500 pieces, maybe more, that are played over and over again, starting basically as far back as maybe 1750. So hundreds of years of music are vetted into about 500 pieces that are regularly played. And of all pieces, West Side Story is in this canon. I mean, it's like I've been saying this, it's like a 1 in a million shot that's, so there's that to draw from for us, for Steven and Tony and all of us. And then the opera CD recording that Bernstein made, I think in 1988, 87, 88, where he hired opera singers it's a recording for Tony and Maria. And they readjusted some of the Broadway orchestration, which is now basically the basis for the definitive Broadway orchestration. So if you're going to perform it, that's what you're going to get, the music based on editing from that show. And we felt all of that was fair game for us. I really did not arrange it. I really did not orchestrate it. This is hard to explain. I am not an orchestrator. I am not an arranger. I've never orchestrated for anybody else. I've never arranged for anybody else. I've only written my own music, orchestrated my own music. But this show, I know backwards and forwards. It's been with me my whole life. And I knew all of these areas. So I was able to help Steven. He had all this stuff to choose from. So he would sort of choose something, and then we'd maybe do something like he needed 10 bars to get into a song, or the choreography would need 8 more bars, or as you said, there's some underscore cues, right? But none of them are me. They're all derived from Bernstein, from these various places. There's a lot of I don't need to go blathering on, but I'd like to explain this up front, because I'm not. It was a very weird job, because it's a canon. As I said, it's a canon piece. It's like messing with Beethoven or Sibelius. It doesn't work well to mess too much with West Side Story. This is the miracle of this movie, is you see it. Yeah, it's different. There's plenty of different stuff in it, but not very much of the music is not derived from those 4 areas. Mainly, we derived it from Broadway. From the Broadway, it's a little bigger because it's a movie. There are more strings, basically, But that's kind of the trajectory of it.
And that brings us to our first question. And again, a huge thanks to La La Land Records. We've got your amazing scores for Hoffa and Galaxy Quest to give away to our first 5 questioners in the U.S. And our first one is from Ivan Sorkin. What was your first reaction when you got an invitation to work with Steven Spielberg?
Well, it's all from John Williams. I had been working with John over the last 4, I don't know, on and off, where they're at the Hollywood Bowl every year. There are 3 concerts that are John Williams night. I know, Daniel, you've been. It's like it's always sold out. It's like a rock concert. Everyone's got their lightsaber. I've never seen anything like it in a format like that with a symphony orchestra. It's insane. And I also so I split that concert with him over the last few years, and I worked with him some in Tanglewood where I split some concerts. John just did a CD of his a lot of his themes that he arranged for the great violinist Anne-Sophie Mutter. So I've done some concerts with her of that John couldn't do. Mostly he does it. Sometimes he can't do it. And so I have a relationship. Also, John, as you said, played on West Side Story piano. But you know what John's first job was playing carousel with Alfred Newman at Fox. And John told me this lovely story about Alfred Newman, about my father, where he was so nervous. He was a young guy. He was an arranger and a pianist, and he wasn't John Williams yet. And he was so nervous, and they'd rehearse for a couple of hours in those days, and then they take really long breaks. And he said Al Newman, he called him Al Newman, came and sat with him on the piano bench and talked to him for 20 minutes, just not about his playing or anything, just kind of chatted about music. And he said it made him feel so at home. And that was really his first experience. And that's where he met Lionel Newman, who was Alfred's youngest brother. And John and Lionel, throughout Lionel's life, were just lifelong friends. They were inseparable. And so John recommended me to Spielberg. I went and met Spielberg, but it was kind of a fait accompli. They needed somebody like me that was able to deal with the Bernstein office. There's a lot of moving parts in this. There are a lot of people involved. There's no obviously Spielberg is in charge of everything, but there's a lot of other stuff that needs to be addressed by everybody. So I dealt with the music side of it with the Bernstein estate in the music, and the vocal supervisor Janine Tesori kind of dealt with the vocals and whatever new lyrics they write. But of course, Sondheim was around for all of it. So, and Sondheim's fine with changing lyrics. So, okay, it's okay for him to change a lyric in West Side Story. It's not okay for anybody else. It's not okay for me to change music because Bernstein's not there. I have to give what the movie needs and what Spielberg needs, but it's not about me. I have to find it and try to make it seamless so nobody notices that it is his music, but it's maybe somewhat arranged in an unostentatious way so that it feels like that we wanted it to feel like it was from the Broadway show. That was the whole idea. So.
And that kind of brings us to our next question by Louis Vercellini. And I'll put new in parentheses, but while scoring the music to West Side Story and at the same time paying homage to the music of the original movie, how much, quote, new music did you have to compose for the new movie, and how challenging was it to find that material?
Again, it's hard if you're not a musician. This is a nuanced thing. Okay, so the arrangement for Somewhere, I did arrange and orchestrate. However, basically, it's where Rita Moreno sings Somewhere. So let me back up, but if you'll indulge me,
please do.
In the Broadway show, Somewhere, the famous song, one of the Maria and Somewhere, arguably the most famous songs in West Side Story. Somewhere was sung in the second act in a ballet, in the middle of a ballet. Jerome Robbins, he's a ballet choreographer as well as doing musicals. by a sort of disembodied offstage voice. It's not even a character that sings it. In the movie, the 61 movie, they dispense with the ballet for good reasons. And Tony and Maria sing somewhere. So Steven decided he wanted Rita, who is, I don't know, for those of you that haven't seen, well, whatever. I'm assuming most of you've seen it, or, you know, you can't ruin the movie, believe me. So Rita Moreno is Doc's widow, and she plays the Doc character that's in the show and in the movie. And the original idea Steven wanted was her to sing it a cappella. But then they decided they didn't want to do that, but we still needed to keep the vibe of it being a cappella. A cappella means no accompaniment at all. And so it's kind of like what we would call a recitative. She sings it. She sings the theme and the notes and everything, but it's almost like she's talking it. And I used that. I did arrange, but we felt there was precedent that it was okay to do that. And when the orchestra does come in about halfway through the song, that's from the Broadway. So I'm not adding anything or doing anything. And the song's the song. It's the song that's in the show and the song that's in the movie. That's as far away as we got. In the last third of the movie, there are several underscore cues. There's a cue that leads into the morgue shot that I did, but it's all based on incidental music that's in the Broadway show, basically. There's a lot of music in the Broadway show that nobody knows. So, you know, some of it was used in the movie, but it was all derived. That's all derived from the scene change music and underscore music in the Broadway show, of which there is a lot. You know, all the music leading up to Tonight, you know, all that kind of stuff. The other thing that we did that was not in the movie is after this Tonight scene, there's a scene where Maria, it's the next morning, right? And you hear this music that is not in the movie because it's from the ballet. It's what's called the Scherzo. In the ballet's in 3 or 4 sections. One of the sections is the happy section, the Scherzo, when Maria and Tony are dancing like they're falling in love, you know, in the Broadway show. And then there's the rumble, you know, then it gets all horrible. And then, we wanted to put the Scherzo somewhere in the movie, but it's in the ballet, so there's no place to really put it in the movie. So Garth Sunderland, who I worked with at the Bernstein estate, actually convinced Steven to just write a whole scene so that we could put that music in. So right after Tonight, it cuts to the city, and there's this music that's kind of dissonant music. And then it pans into her bedroom.
Yes,
she's still in her white dress, and she wants to pretend that she's slept and not. I mean, you don't exactly know was she with Tony all night or, you know, whatever. So he did a whole scene where she just kind of poofed her hair and got herself, took off her lipstick and took off her dress, you know, and did all the thing. And so that was kind of a new thing. That wasn't in the movie, and it was completely different than it was in the ballet, because you can't have a ballet there's no way to get a ballet in a movie like this. I mean, you know, they couldn't even do it in the 61 movie. So
yeah, that really hit me. That was like, oh, like David sounds exactly like Leonard Bernstein.
No. That's also in the Symphonic Dances. We actually pulled that orchestration as the Symphonic Dances orchestration. So yeah.
Now, Jake Tanner wants to know, what freedom were you allowed to interpret the music to fit a more modern era? Which goes again to how great the music sounds and fresh. It really sounds pretty contemporary.
No. Okay, all right. It's performed that way, but this in no way was an update of anything, at least from the musical side. The Broadway show in Bernstein's our North Star. It's a canonical piece. Anything we did to make it to what we needed to give Spielberg, we made it so that it was not Austin. You hopefully didn't notice it. It sounded authentic and organic. That was our job. So now the way, in my opinion. I mean, you know me, Daniel. I'm not prone to saying how great something is that I worked on, but that is the best recording of West Side Story out there, in my opinion. Now,
Absolutely,
it's the right tempo, it's the right feel. We worked like dogs. Sean Murphy, the engineer, who's John and Steven's scoring mixer, and David Channing, who was the editor, and just it was a mammoth job editing this, mixing it. We got stopped by COVID. It was like a nightmare. And we worked really, really hard to make it as great as possible, as great a performance of West Side Story, the 1957 Bernstein original, as much that it felt like that this was organic, and it was that. And not that we were updating it or reimagining it, or, you know, that is done more on the production, the screenplay side. And the final thing I'll say about this is, for any of you guys out there that are opera people that love opera is also a canon thing. There are these pieces that are played over and over again. So say, take something like Madame Butterfly, Puccini opera. You're going to see, they do productions every year somewhere, and it does a production. The music's the same. The text is the same, but the productions, what they're wearing, how it's lit, how they move, what the director wants to emphasize, what he wants to de-emphasize. All that is fair game in the opera world. You can do anything you want in a production, and it's fine. It doesn't wreck it. So it's not a perfect analogy, but that's how we approach the music in West Side Story. Yes, we had to do some writing. I had to do some writing, but it was all about it not bringing attention to it, because we wanted it to be as pure and authentic as possible. I believe that's why it works.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
We're celebrating this great work of art that's 60 years old, and it doesn't need updating, really. It's great that it's re-recorded and it sounds great. Yes, that's a given. So.
And that brings us to Uncle Donald's question. How much of your arrangement had to be pre-recorded versus being accomplished in post?
Uncle Donald, yes. We pre-recorded everything, and then we did it all over again. So it was a very complicated, we knew that we pre-recorded everything that we needed to do to for them to, I mean, I think there's like 90 minutes of music we pre-recorded in the show. But we knew we were going to come back and basically redo everything. So with that that's how we approached it. So there was so much work done in post-production. The reason I think that we did that is actually because we could. You couldn't do that in 1961. It just technically wasn't possible. Now you can pre-record something, slow it down, speed it up, change it, re-click it, and perfectly synchronize it in post-production if you need to. And Dudamel wasn't available for all of the pre-recording. Gustavo Dudamel, who conducted it, and the New York Philharmonic wasn't available for all of it. So we kind of knew we were going to go back. So that's when we did all the, underscoring, and we, made a million little adjustments and pieces and choreography. And after they cut the picture, because when they start cutting the picture, and then some of the they cut some of the choreography, or they add something, or whatever it is that they added something that they didn't have music for. So the editor or the music editor makes some crappy edit, but so we have to figure it out, re-record it, and insert it. And there's a lot of that. It's very unusual to do it this way, but it's perfectly doable because of the technology, which they definitely did not have in 1961.
And that goes to James Anthony Phillips. One of the kind of new sequences is, Play It Cool in the movie, which I've seen 5 million times, played after the whole, the Rumble. And in this, it takes place before it. And he loved the ballet modern dance sequence between Rick and Tony.
Yeah, it's great.
Tell me about the genesis of that sequence and the scoring of it.
Okay. Again, that's cool from the show, from the Broadway show. That's now there are some edits in it And also we used a really great stand-up bass player. So this is the way this works. Like normally in the Broadway show, you hire 30 people, 40 people, and there's probably one or two bass players, and they're what are called arco bass players and stand-up bass players. So they're really good at both, but they're not an expert at one or the other generally. Now, if you're in New York, maybe you can hire somebody that really is an expert. But we hired a great New York stand-up bass player to play on that. And the drummer we got was really great. So I thought we got a really great feel into that number. The choreography was all conceived by Kushner and Spielberg way back. That was part of the process. So I don't really know how that evolved. I thought it was brilliant. It just made it so more dangerous and menacing. What was coming up in the Rumble. It gave a lot more clarity to all. I thought that's a lot what the screenplay did, is it clarified pretty much everyone's motivation, why they were doing what they were doing. And that's a great example of something really different that I think just works. And it seems like inevitable. I mean, it's not in the spirit of the 57 Broadway show for some reason. I'm not sure I can even put my finger on it. It seems right and inevitable, and it's played great. And, it's a fugue in the middle. Bernstein's using classical music forms, and he's using a weird interval, which is called an augmented fourth. That's like a chauffeur, a call to worship, a Jewish chauffeur. And that's the augmented fourth interval. And he's using vaudeville, and he's using opera, and he's, and Latin and Latin jazz and regular jazz and bebop and, and mashing it all together. So we were able to use, players for certain things that were good at certain things, because we were doing a movie, not a show where you have a set group of people. They might not all be experts in all that area. We had a lot of Latin percussion. We did a lot with the percussion in the mambo. And in America, I think, is another thing that just works like gangbusters.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Now, Dale would like to know, in what ways did you interact with the Leonard Bernstein estate for his approvals? And there was a fantastic exhibition at the Skirball a while ago, and he'd love to know if you got to see that.
I did not. I would have loved to have seen that. I had worked with the Bernstein estate since 2011. Basically, I worked with Garth Sunderland, who did the sort of reorchestration for live film that we debuted in 2011, and then we also did On the Waterfront, I think around 2015, as a movie with live orchestra. And so I was really used to working with Garth. They had a lot of say because of the Alex and Jamie and Alex, his kids, or two of his kids, are very involved in the Bernstein estate. I don't know exactly how the power structure was truly organized, but everyone needed to agree. So I had to get approval from Sondheim and from the Leonard, and then I'd go to the Leonard Bernstein, to Garth, and we'd go over it. And then if I thought what we changed was too weird, then I'd send it back to Spielberg to get him to approve. I wanted to get him to approve first, and then get the Bernsteins and me and all of us in sync. It was really a big, huge group effort on at least the orchestration arranging side of it. So.
Now, Charles Mallory would like to know, how much conforming of the score did you have to do to complete due to the edits in the film itself, that obviously you can't have everything cut exactly like the original film?
Yeah, we did a lot, but I'm used to doing. I mean, conforming is the mainstay of film music anyway. You're always, if I'm correct in it, in that I'm defining conforming by what his question is.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. So, music editors are always conforming, composer, either I conform or the music editor conforms it or whatever. but that's why there was so much work in post-production, because things kept changing. And then we'd add music, and we went through that normal kind of post-production process, but we went through a lot of it on stuff that we'd already pre-recorded. So, I'd pull in what we pre-recorded, and then if I needed to add something, I'd mock it up like I'd normally do in my sequencer, and I'd have the audio play, then I'd mock up whatever many bars, or we'd make an edit. The music editor would make an edit if it was shortening. And then if it didn't work, I'd add some bars to try to make it work. It was a lot of that. It was a lot of conforming. That's a good way to put it.
Now, I mean, what was it like being on the set?
I wasn't on the set.
Oh,
I never was on the set. No, I worked from 2018. There were months of rehearsals. I was at a lot of rehearsals. And then we did all the pre-records. Once the pre-records were done, there was nothing for us, for the music department to do. Matt Sullivan, the music supervisor, took all the files. We mixed all the files. We stemmed it out. It got to the sound people, and then they shot the music through mostly the summer of 2019. And then we started up again in post, like the fall of 2019 or late fall. And then we went back and we did all our work. We went back in December and in January to do some of this post recording that I'm discussing. And then we were about to go back in March. We were supposed to be back March 20th to finish it. And of course we couldn't go back. So we kind of sat around for 6 months, and, nobody knew how long it was going to last. We thought maybe we could get back. So we hung around, and then finally we ended up doing stuff here in Los Angeles. That's why Los Angeles Philharmonic is also listed in the end credits. If you can stay to the end of the end credits, you can see it's New York Phil. New York Phil did most of it, and then but a lot. LA Phil did a lot too. But of course, LA Phil is Dudamel's home band, and he's really in New York he conducts all the time too. So and they've all done the 61 movie at least 2 times. I think LA we did it 3 separate occasions, twice at the Bowl and once at Disney Hall. We had done it since 2011. So they all really knew the music. I'd rehearsed a lot of this with the New York Philharmonic and the LA Philharmonic. So it was great. And then Gustavo was great, and like I said, we're really proud of the way this sounds.
No, it sounds absolutely terrific. Obviously you started out as a session player, and I imagine you must have played on a Steven Spielberg score really early in your career. I mean, obviously, like, Steven Spielberg is kind of the golden god to so many of us. What was it like to work with him? I mean, to have that kind of direct communication.
On West Side Story, you're talking
on West Side
right?
Story, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It's hard to figure it, since it was so confusing initially who was going to do what. So it took us a while to figure it out. But my God, what a film he made! It's just extraordinary. I think he had this vision from the beginning, and I think a lot of people, I think still people that haven't seen it are a little confused by what's the point of remaking it, and you have to see it to see what a great take it is on it without it changing it, really. I mean, obviously it's changed, but also Spielberg is the best dubbing. He is the best dubbing mixing team of anyone. Everything he dubs, the music is used to its the possible maximum benefit. It was just thrilling listening to the dub. So it was great. But it was, it's an arranging, orchestrating job for me. I'm probably never gonna. If it wasn't West Side Story, I probably wouldn't have done it, because it's not what I do. But for West Side Story, I love it so much and I know it so well, and there was plenty to draw from, so it was fine. It was great.
Wow. Now Uncle Donald's got a pretty good question here, and it's kind of one of the changes. Usually, again, at the ending,
Yeah.
Estonia's Dying Maria usually sings a few bars of Somewhere, which brought me to tears. Was that shot, but then just not used? And
no. It's Steven. They always want. Okay, this was a big argument. This, by the way, Steven always wanted to use Only You. It's definitely the ending is structured different than the Broadway show and the movie. I get it. And those of us that know it really well, it's jarring a bit, but that was discussed by the Bernstein estate and Steven, and this is how it eventually ended up, but it was very well thought out, I think. So also there's music playing during Maria's scene when she points the gun. How many bullets do I have?
Right.
Okay. In the Broadway show and the movie, there's no music there. That all plays without music. And that was also Steven's idea. And I thought at first, I didn't know what to think. And then when I saw it, I just, for this movie, the movie we're all involved with, it was great. And we use the end of the Symphonic Dances is how we end the movie. It's a little more of a lush version of I Have a Love, and then the funeral, the funeral music that it ends on, and that beautiful shot as it shoots up. But it's definitely different, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one thing that kind of threw me off, and I'm just like such an original movie purist who loved this one, is I Feel Pretty is after the stabbing, which kind of makes it kind of ironic in a way that it never was originally.
Actually, I Feel Pretty is the opening of the second act in the Broadway show. So I Feel Pretty, the end of the first act of the Broadway show is the Rumble. That's what ends the act. The beginning of Act 2 is I Feel Pretty for precisely that reason, is because just for some comic relief. Krupke is also in a different place. Obviously, Cool is in a different. Cool is before the Rumble in the show. I don't know. It gets confusing. The 61 movie messed around a little bit with where the songs were, and like I said, Somewhere and all that stuff. So again, there was precedent to do that. Also, Sondheim was there. He was there and around, and Steven, I think, was sending him Tony Kirshner's script versions, and so everybody was on board. Nothing happened without everyone's approval, without all the authors' estates. 4 authors, right? The Jerome Robbins estate, he's deceased. Arthur Lawrence estate, he's deceased. Leonard Bernstein's estate, he's deceased, and then Sondheim, who was alive during it. But all of them had people that weighed in on everything. So it as much as there's one person in charge, which is obviously Spielberg, he was extremely gracious and used everybody, I think, to their best efforts, which I think is obvious by the way that it turned out. So
I mean, again, for someone like me and for so many people who have never seen the stage show, I mean, it says something, about how movies can, because obviously Broadway by its nature, you have to go to Broadway, but movies are like everyone sees them. What do you think it says about, how movies kind of become the Bible as to how people view Broadway to film translations?
Yeah. Well, I think when West Side Story came out, it's in the middle of 57. Maybe it was the end of 50. I can't remember. It's 1957. And it's a hit, but it's not like a monster hit. Okay. Then they put out the Broadway cast album, which was a big hit, and it became a much bigger hit. But then they bring out the movie, and the movie's a monster hit. And it is instantly seen all over the world. And Bernstein was famous by 61. But not like this. This made his career, in my opinion. The movie West Side Story, which they very much disliked, I think was responsible for basically everyone in the world knowing who Leonard Bernstein is or was. And that's the thing. It's technology. you can see a movie everywhere instantly in the world with as many people as want to see it. It's not sold out. It's not in one place. The other thing is a lot of people came to West Side Story, at least in the United States, like Uncle Donald and I at Pally, if I'm right about Uncle Donald, in high school musicals. There's a lot of high schools and colleges started doing West Side Story. So they learned the show from that. But most people's view of West Side Story is exactly what you're saying. It's from the movie.
Now I'm going to go back to another question from James Anthony Phillips. How much input did you have with the music editing and the dance sequences with Spielberg?
I mean, what do you mean? It's like if they change the choreography, they'll make an edit in the editing room, and so then you just have to clean up the edit. I mean, it's generally a bad edit. Like they'll cut out a beat. So da 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2. They'll do something that's very difficult. To take out one beat on a rhythm thing is hard. So we would have to add some. We'd have to. That's why we kept patching, doing little patches of a few bars before and after an edit to make it work. And we kept doing it because it until we were ready, and then we did all the post recording. The editing was kind of just organically from the cutting room to the music editor, and then to me, essentially me and Garth, to kind of figure out what to do. And then I'd either mock it up, or generally I'd mock it up, and we'd piece it in, show Spielberg, and we just go back and forth through that. So a lot of it was that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
I mean, for you, what were the big improved stuff that you may have not liked in the Robert Wise film that you thought Spielberg got right here?
Well, okay, I think that the weakest part of the Broadway show, if I may be so bold, is the book. It's great on stage because the stage is a bare stage. It's a musical ballet, essentially. It's the Romeo and Juliet story, but it doesn't go into a huge amount of depth, or as much depth as it could, into all the characters, the sort of diaspora of the Jets, the Sharks, Shrank, Tony, Maria, Anita, the girl, the Shark girls, the Jet girls, all that stuff. So the movie does a little bit more, but the movie really doesn't. For instance, Maria in the movie is still kind of an object. And in this movie, Maria is really proactive, and it doesn't wreck the story. I'm not a huge Shakespeare person, but I pretty much remember in Shakespeare, Juliet's not just a little, beautiful looking butterfly that Tony doesn't want to scare away, or, she's a little more proactive. But also stuff like the way the show starts, very much like it's filmic like the 61 movie in a way, but you get this oppressive feel with the sound and everything. And then they all pop out of the ground like they're rats, they're crushed. And you have this thing where their world is crushed. It's being gentrified, which is basically what happened in 1959 when they built Lincoln Center. That's why that little picture of Lincoln Center is. That was where this all took place. That was the time. And I think it made you think, well, I sort of get now why you would be a Jet. And the Sharks are trying to make a place for themselves in America, in New York. And so the conflict, I think, becomes more it becomes tougher and more realistic and more authentic. And then out of that, of course, this love grows, but it seems a little more contemporary, not quite so magical. I mean, they fall in love instantly, and he does do an effects scene during the dance at the gym and or the mambo, at the end of the mambo. But it's a little more realistic how they fall in love. I also particularly love, and this was all Spielberg, the way we got into a lot of the songs, the way we got into Krupke, the way we got into Something's Coming was the same, the way we got into A Boy Like That, the way we got into the quintet, because in the show and in the movie, they just appear. And it just didn't seem right. It was jarring. Oh, here's a song. Oh, here's a song. He wanted all the choreography and the singing to come organically out of the drama of the picture. I think this is something my father, Alfred Newman, was good at. If you go back and watch King and I, Carousel, South Pacific, yeah, there are numbers that start and are big, but there's a lot of leading up into the musical numbers, and then at the end of musical numbers, that don't end in an applause thing, coming out of it, So I thought that was very effective in a film. I don't think the show needs it, but I think a film like this in our day and age needs it. And finally, could it be more timely? I mean, it's like the ultimate tribal movie of killing. They kill everything. They kill this beautiful, innocent love. And yeah, there's a little bit of hope at the end, but it's so, I think, poignant for the world we live in right now. This ridiculous tribalism that we're all enmeshed in right now.
I don't know if it's so ridiculous in this country, but that kind of leads me to La La Land is one of their Christmas releases, put out a very pertinent film that your father scored, and still one of his most beautiful and much awaited scores, which is The Diary of Anne Frank.
59.
What's it like finally having that out, and listening to it now? What do you take away from it?
I mean, you first have to ask yourself, what is that theme doing there on a story like that? Is it like it's the most beautiful, lush, hopeful young theme? I guess it makes sense because Anne is so hopeful in her diary before she, goes off to get killed, especially the last cue. But when you watch that film, if you watch the whole thing, there's a lot of places in it where there's no music at all. Or there's a cue like when they're in the attic during the day just waiting, and there's just kind of a chime and a little sort of soft motor in the background. It's a tour de force, I think, in terms of spotting, and I love the score. I love that score. I love the score to All About Eve, the 1950 Mankiewicz film. I think there's only 30 minutes of music in a 2-hour film, and I think it's one of his best scores. As is Diary of Anne Frank. Diary of Anne Frank, I think, is 59, right?
Yes, I think
Daniel's
so.
that right? 1959. Yeah, All About Eve is 1950. So it's the heyday of the Fox music department.
Now I'm jumping back into West Side Story. I just loved how Rita Moreno was kind of repurposed and rethought to have her sing, that song. I mean, I thought that was probably the coolest revamp that was done for this film. And what did you think of that?
No, I thought it was great. She was very involved. She's a producer in the movie. She was there a lot, and she weighed in a lot, and so she's a big part of this movie. I mean, it's so weird because there are so many people involved in this movie, in the post-production, and it felt at times like really chaotic, but Spielberg just like had a way of just getting what he needed from everyone and making it all work, and everybody working together. And he kept saying, and I know this is nuts, but he kept saying that his wife, Kate, said to him to just lead everyone with love. And I know that the feeling I had in 11th grade, being in a production of West Side Story at a high school with probably 4,000 kids, there's probably 300 kids in the cast, and rehearsing for 3 months, was one of the most thrilling things I've ever done in my life. And it was all about loving it. No one was getting paid. Nothing. Everyone showed up because it was just so great to just be around something so beautiful. And some of the kids are really talented and can sing, and we have an orchestra, and we're doing all that. To me, this film has that kind of vibe. Obviously, it's on the highest level, everything. I mean, the cinematography is gorgeous. The sound is incredible. The costume design, the whole thing. But it feels like everybody would have done it for free, and that everybody knew how important this was. And for our little music team, doing the soundtrack was almost as hard as doing the movie. Because we started off doing it in COVID, and we couldn't be in the same room. So it was, and we wanted to make the soundtrack like a little mini film. We wanted it to be dramatic, so we remixed things in it. And that was sort of the last thing that we did. But it was an absolutely thrilling, and quite unexpectedly thrilling. I didn't know what to make of it when it started.
Now, COVID and thrilling, I know those words go together, but I mean, I was at the Williams concert at the Bowl, which was essentially kind of the return of the Bowl after the horrendous year. And dude, it's like watching, you as a rock star get in front of that, what's it like for you to kind of be part of that? Well, I don't know if we're ever going to return to normal, but essentially being able to go back to outdoor concerts and to perform John Williams. I mean, what was that like for you to be part of that rejuvenation of the Bowl?
That's great. I mean, I love conducting. I spent my 20s trying to be a conductor. I had no interest at all in writing film music. And here I am conducting, like great orchestras. And I actually learned a lot in my 20s. I learned a lot more than I thought I learned, because now I'm in front of the best orchestras. I mean, some of the best orchestras in the world. And it really teaches you how to do it. I mean, given that you have a background. I also, Daniel, I love film music. I love the art form. I think people do not understand it. They don't know what it is. It's difficult because it bridges commerce and art. And nothing's going to make as much money in music that could be said to be kind of bridge class, orchestral music with popular music. People that compose film scores get very wealthy, a lot of them, and does that mean it's not an art? To some people, that does mean it's not an art, but I think those of us what I love now about this, of doing the whole movie, it means those musicians have to sit there and play through the whole movie, and not just one, 2 rehearsals, 3 performances. That's 5 times through an entire movie. So you're not just hearing the themes or stuff. You're hearing everything, the way he works stuff in to make it an arty film score, and you're able, then those musicians are able to make a judgment now without, saying it's not great, without even really studying it or hearing it, So I'm really happy to be able to do that. And I like to rehearse, and I like to explain to them what's going on in the film. They want to know what's going on. And playing film music is different than playing concert music. It's more aggressive. You have to, you're competing with sound. It needs to be clear, what we call phrases. It's how a song or a theme moves from one part to the next part to the next part. So that has to be exaggerated, or it doesn't cut through. They need to be taught that. That's not normally the way you play concert music. So the little I've had influence on it, even if it's just a tiny bit, I'm very happy to be doing that, and I'm really glad to be back. I hope we don't go nuts again,
I hope not.
Yeah.
Well, again, to wrap up, not so much a question, but an appreciation, which I think represents a lot of us. Peter Hackman, just wanted to say everyone involved with the music, it turned out great and well done. It's been in constant repeat in our home. It's been on constant repeat in on my stereo.
Great.
I think, obviously it's we're in a new age of movie going, where I think a lot of stuff is going to also really live in, in homes and cable people and stuff like that. Do you foresee this West Side Story for the generation it was made for supplanting the older one, or just kind of becoming its own thing?
I think it'll become its own thing. Quite honestly, Daniel, I'm not very optimistic about the movie industry in general. I think it's in an existential crisis in a way, and I don't think everyone's dealing sort of with the concept of what's happening with streaming and how really to make streaming movies work. They certainly figured out how to make episodic television work streaming, but this feels like a movie. This is something I would always have wanted to see in a movie theater. So I've seen it 3 times now in a movie theater. I don't know what it'll be like streaming it. I mean, I have a wonderful little theater at home, but it's just not the same. And I don't know about the screening you saw, if people are clapping after, America, or I imagine almost everywhere you go, people are.
Oh, people are clapping. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like going to, that's not at home. That's not going to happen, So I don't know. I think it's a great adjunct. It certainly is the best recorded West Side Story out there. That I can humbly say I definitively believe. Some might disagree with me, but I think the tempo, the feel, the aggressiveness of it, the masculinity of it, which is really important, the toughness in it in West Side Story, it's a very important aspect of it, and the fuzzy string stuff for Tony and Maria, which should be just like sparkling, angelic, all that. I think we got it into the score.
Very, very true.
I mean, again, the performance.
I mean, again, I just cannot urge people enough to see this film on a big screen, because it's a fantastic remake and it absolutely deserves it. Well, David, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. See West Side Story in movie theaters with its soundtrack on Hollywood Records. And thanks to Mark Northam, our producer Dale Turner, Kyrie Hood, Heather Davis, and La La Land Records. And I'll see you on the next Film Music Live in December 30th at 1, when we have the Kingsman composers, Matthew Markuson and Dominic Lewis. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks, David.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.